Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Within Zionism, here with Ozzy Fine and Moshe Schwartzberg, and special guest Bryan Leib. How are you, Bryan?
Very good, thank you. Thanks for having me, Ozzy. It's Leib, but listen, I've been called Leib my whole life, so who cares?
Oh, interesting. All right, Moshe, how are you?
I'm doing amazing. It's our first major guest, so this should be fun.
Yeah, I hear Bryan has some interesting stories to tell us. Before we begin, I want to thank Abe Peller and his wife Sarah and his kids Tyler, who served in Shirion as a lone soldier, Miles, also a lone soldier, who served in Nachal, and his two girls Hallie and Olivia, for their generous donation. The money will obviously be put towards improving the podcast.
Yeah, and as many of you may have noticed, this is our Bar Mitzvah episode, number 13.
Yeah, that's what we're calling it.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I didn't realize this was I was being bar mitzvahed all again, but that's amazing.
Mazel tov, Bryan.
All
right, so let's get into it. Bryan, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. So first of all, guys, thanks again for having me on. It's a real honor and pleasure to be with you. Most importantly, to be with two young Jews like yourself, within Israel. It's a real honor for me to be with you guys. I'm originally from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where I was born and raised. I've had the great privilege of really having exposure to the business sector, having exposure to the nonprofit sector, and also to the political spectrum as well, having run for Congress in 2018 back in Philadelphia. So I think, I have a couple different hats that I can put on. But I got to tell you, the hat I think I'm most proud of is being a Zionist and really doing whatever I can to support the next generation of Jews here in America, in Israel, around the world. And I think that it's Zionism and Judaism, need to go hand in hand. At least that's how I was taught at a young age, and was very, very thankful, guys, to have my mom's parents, my grandparents, who were like a set of parents to me. Who really instilled at a young age what it meant to be a Jew in America, how to support Israel, and to lead by action, and not always just by words. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm happy to answer any questions and tell you a little bit more about what's going on here back home in America.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, and it definitely shows through your work. I looked through what you do and what you've done, and it's amazing stuff. It's really good.
You mentioned that that you're a Zionist, but what would that be as a definition for you? Like, define Zionism for yourself.
I think Zionism in its simplest form, Moshe, is the Jewish people's right to self-determinate in our ancestral homelands. And I think it's really that simple. And I think I would add to that I have come to a place now in my thought process where I don't know why Zionism has to be so political. I know that on the left and on the right, it's very politicized. But I think if we speak to the banner share of Jews in America, over 90% of Jews in America support Zionism. But you don't see that active. Those supporters of Zionism are not on Twitter, on Facebook. They're not holding rallies. They're not being active in their support of Israel and of Zionism because of how politicized things have become. It's a sad state of affairs when I have college students here in America telling me, Bryan, I'm afraid that if I speak out on a Monday, on Tuesday, they're going to draw a swastika on my door and call me a Nazi. Unfortunately, that's been happening on a lot of college campuses where Jewish students, for being outspoken Zionists, are called Nazis. So back to the question, Moshe, I just think in its simplest format, Zionism is supporting the Jewish people's right to our ancestral homeland, and it's supporting the Jewish people and the land, not just the people. It's supporting the land of Israel.
Very, very well said. I'm not really sure what to add to that, because I was just like, that summed it up.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Thank you.
It's true. We'll get into the whole politics part of it in a minute. We just have a few more questions to ask you before we really dive in.
Of course.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you if you have any personal connection to Israel. You don't live in Israel, you live in America, so if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I hate to not hate to, but I hate to bring my grandparents back in, but they're really the reason why I'm so connected to Israel. My grandparents, like a lot of my contemporaries' grandparents here in America, spent their entire lives fighting for Israel, supporting Israel, raising money for Israel. And then outside of that, whether it was the Soviet Jewry movement, which my grandparents helped co-found in Philadelphia, to being one of the first temples in Philadelphia to bring Israel bonds into the temple, and to start selling bonds to support Israel. So my grandparents spent their entire lives fighting for Jewish people and fighting for Eretz Israel. And for me, my connection is through my grandparents. I've been to Israel on many occasions. I have so many stories of things that I've experienced, but I have to tell you the story, and I might have already told you, but for your listeners to hear, my grandparents were subtle and not so subtle about Israel, about being a proud Jew throughout my life growing up, and I for birthdays would receive an Israel bond, or they planted a tree through the Jewish National Fund in my memory. But something happened actually. We're talking about bar mitzvah here. I'm not sure if it was my 13th birthday or my 12th birthday, but I was really into the flight simulator games on my computer, on my desktop. And I had the throttle and the joystick and everything, and it was a lot of fun for me. And I remember one year my grandparents gave me a video game called the IAF, the Israeli Air Force. And here I am at 12 or 13 years old, guys, flying fighter missions to bomb tanks on the border coming in from Egypt, or coming in from the north, or flying in to take out a nuclear reactor. That was my grandparents' way, I think, of very subtly, help forming the Zionist that I am today. But I've got to tell you, I completely forgot all about that until 2018. I was in Israel on a Jewish National Fund mission trip, and we were driving through the IAF, the Israeli Air Force Academy, their academy. And I remember the tour guide said, everyone look out your window to the left, and this is a former fighter jet that the IAF used to use. Does anyone know what it is? And I honestly, guys, no hesitation, I raised my hand and I said, that's a Mirage fighter jet. And then I think to myself, I spent the whole day thinking to myself, how did I know that was a Mirage fighter jet? And it brought me back to the story that I just told. It's a blessing, honestly, a blessing to have had grandparents that were so involved in my life and helped really form the man that I am today. And that's a cool story in terms of my connection to Israel. But I have many friends that are living inside of Israel, and I'll tell you this, and one last story real quick. When I was in Israel, same trip, JNF in 2018, I remember I was with Yedidia Harush, who helps build new communities in Israel, and he said to me, the sun was setting. I remember this clear as day. He said, Bryan, I hear your passion, I see your passion. He said, but why are the Jewish people back in America? Why don't they have the same passion that you have? And that was a wake-up call, guys. That was a wake-up call to me, because I thought that everyone in America, all the Jews in America, supported Israel the way I did. But he's right. Unfortunately, there are a lot of Jews in America that don't see or understand or believe in the importance of supporting Israel in today's world. And listen, let's not kid ourselves. It's a very different world in terms of my grandparents versus today. My grandparents' generation, lived through so much with Israel and had to do everything that they could to help and support Israel for Israel to become the strong nation that it is today. And I think a lot of young Jews in America, they see Israel as an economic powerhouse, as a military powerhouse, and they say to themselves, why do I have to support Israel? The way that generations before me did. And the short answer to that is there can't be any gray area there. We have to continue to support Israel. We have to continue to do everything we can to be advocates for Israel. And we also, I think, have to create a space, guys, here in America, where it's okay for an American Jew to say that I'm a Zionist, I support Israel, I'm going to fight anti-Semitism wherever it comes from. But you know what, guys? I'm not the biggest fan of Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, or I'm not the biggest fan of the Likud minority. I think that's okay. And this is coming from a guy that is very political. I think we have to really kind of, in a way, depoliticize how much Israel, how political Israel's become, how political Zionism has become. But we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, so before we get more into that, the whole politics side of it,
Yep.
I want to know why you're not in Israel. Share to our audience, to the listeners, why you decided to stay in America, why you never made Aliyah, if you ever had the thought about it.
That's a great question. I've got to tell you, I very much thought of making Aliyah. And I got pretty close. So, a couple of years ago in 2018, I actually went through the process with Nefesh B'Nefesh and, started that process. But honestly, guys, I kind of had a moment of clarity, and I'll tell you what that clarity was. I felt that I could be such a better advocate and supporter for Israel being here in America. I felt like if I came and made Aliyah to Israel, I would just be another American Jew who is a strong supporter of Zionism coming to Israel. And I really still believe to my core today that I can do so much more to help Israel and support Israel and partner with Israel being here in America than I would by being in Israel itself.
I agree with that. That's amazing.
Is there any point where you would consider making Aliyah?
Yeah, of course. I mean, great question. We see what the anti-Semitism that's been rising in this country for years now.
You got to get out of there while you still can.
Listen, guys, in 2019, a lot of people don't know this. In 2019, Jews were being attacked on what felt like a daily basis in Brooklyn. Orthodox Jews, visible Jews, were being attacked on a daily basis. And now with the shooting in Poway, the Tree of Life massacre, and the things that continue to happen in Jersey City, it's over and over and over again. I think we might get to a place in America, and I'm going to do everything I can to fight to make sure we don't get to this place. But we might get to a place in America where we do all have to make Aliyah, because Israel is our homeland. And thank God that Israel has an army to defend themselves. Thank God Israel has a strong economy to support themselves. So I would never rule it out. I would never rule out making Aliyah.
Well, when you do, you know where I live. All right, so everything you were saying before about how you're staying in America to advocate and, you're being an activist and everything you're doing, can you explain what you're doing?
Yeah, of course. So, it's a combination of a lot of things. And we'll talk a little bit more about the new organization that I and 8 other Jewish leaders here in America just started. But, I think one of the most important things about being an advocate here in America for Israel, for Zionism, and for fighting anti-Semitism is we have to be vocal and we have to be visible. That means that, we have to find a way to get ourselves on national television to talk about what's happening. We have to, get ourselves positioned in newspapers and write op-eds to have a voice. That's, I think, the most important thing is having a voice. And I think, I certainly, I have that voice. And one of the things that really is special and near and dear to my heart is helping to create other voices. I can't begin to tell you guys how many friends of mine I've convinced and helped ultimately get them published in writing op-eds and getting them on television, getting their voice heard. And, just helping amplify our voices and helping. I'm a 34-year-old guy, right? So by no means am I, fully established in my life with a family. God willing, that'll happen. But, I've taken an approach too, guys, where I've started to be a mentor for high school students, for college students. And I've taken that approach because I very much believe in supporting the next generation. So in short, the answer is we have to use our voices. We have to bring other people along with us to use their voices too. And we have to speak the truth. We have to speak the truth.
Yeah, so about like the voices and everything, that's one thing that I say a lot. If you take like one day to just listen to all of our episodes and count the amount of times that I'll be like, just have your voices heard, just talk about everything, just, even if it's a bad, thought or whatever it is, just share it, and if you share something that's wrong, then you'll get the truth back. So like whatever you have on your mind, just speak it.
Yeah, we did a whole entire episode on that.
Yeah.
I would just add, guys, that the work here in your 13th podcast, and God willing, you're going to get to 100 podcasts. I think whether you know it or not, you've already inspired people. You've already inspired your contemporaries to use their voices. That's something that I've seen in the advocacy work that I've done, where people all the time are they're reaching out to say, Bryan, you've inspired me to speak up. You've inspired me to be a prouder Jew. And I have no doubt that you've already inspired other people, and you will continue to inspire people. And you're right. It's just using your voice. It's using your voice and inspiring people. And my hat is off to the both of you guys for creating this podcast, especially with COVID and coronavirus and what's happening. You're turning a horrible situation into a very positive situation. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Thank you so much. All right, now, do you want to get into what you do, your organization, HaShevet?
Sure, of course. So HaShevet is Shevet. The word is Hebrew, loosely translated into the tribe, or I think also into the stick, or the shaft.
That one I've never heard.
Yeah, and the organization HaShevet is really very, very new. It's myself and 8 other founding board members that are young Jewish professionals that, in their own right are very, very successful. We have a diversity of opinions, diversity of political opinions. And HaShevet was formed to really be a watchdog of Jewish organizations that claim to be Jewish, that claim to support Zionism, and claim to fight anti-Semitism. But at the end of the day, they really don't. And not to put them, on blast mode, but, I'm talking about groups like If Not Now. I'm talking about groups like J Street, who publicly their platforms say they support Zionism, say they support Israel, but they do everything they can behind the scenes to hurt Israel. Listen, at the end of the day, I think that's ridiculous. I think that we need to be strong supporters of our beliefs, and we need to call it out wherever it's coming from. If it's coming from the left, we'll call it out. If it's coming from the right, we'll call it out. If it's coming from the middle, we'll call it out. We have to call it out. We cannot be quiet. And unfortunately, these groups like If Not Now and J Street, they claim, by the way, guys, they claim to represent the majority of Jews in America. That is factually a lie. It's a lie. There's poll after poll after poll that says that the Jewish people support Israel. 90% consider themselves Zionists here in America. So how does J Street say that they represent the majority of America when they put out a tweet and they only get 12 likes on their tweet? It's BS, but they make a lot of noise. They're really good at making noise and getting attention. And unfortunately, guys, what's happening in this country, in my opinion, is that the majority of Jews are in the middle. They're not far left, they're not far right, they're in the middle. And there's no one that's really speaking to the center left and center right and center Jews in this country about it's okay, to stand up and support Zionism and support Israel. So, we want to be a Jewish watchdog of these groups, and we're going to hold people accountable. And we're going to do it in a professional and factual manner. That's part 1 of HaShevet. Part 2 of HaShevet is that we want to be an incubator of the next generation of Jewish professionals in this country. We want to help Jewish professionals and young Jews in this country that want to be more involved. We want to help them become better leaders. We want to teach them what it's like to sit on a board, what it's like to sit on a committee, what it's like to be a lay leader, and also giving them an education, a non-political education, a non-biased education about Zionism, about Israel, about anti-Semitism. And the thought process is that if we can create this database of hundreds, if not hopefully thousands, of these young Jewish professionals, that we will then be able to go to national Jewish organizations and say, we have these individuals, they'd like to be a part of your group, and then we will advocate to put them inside of these Jewish organizations. And in a way, by doing this, if I can put 100 or 1,000 Bryans in Jewish organizations, then we're safeguarding the future of the Jewish people here in America. So that is the nuts and bolts of the organization. We welcome anyone that wants to be part of what we're doing. First of all, follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Yes, thank you. follow the work that we're doing. We're a new organization, but I think we're going to be able to accomplish very big things for our people.
All right, yeah, good luck with that. It sounds amazing. Let me just ask you, what's your approach? Like, if you could explain in brief in like just a few words. Like, what's your take on it? How do you approach these situations?
So we have to approach them with facts. We really we have to counter what J Street, and if not now, we're saying with facts. They like to speak to emotion, and we really have to counter them with facts. And we have to show people as well. Think like I'll give you an example. J Street wants to condition military and foreign aid, U.S. foreign aid to Israel. And a common misconception, guys, that a lot of people have is that they think that the U.S. just writes this blank check and gives it to Israel for Israel to do whatever they want to do with this money. That's not true. The fact of the matter is that over 75% of the U.S. foreign aid that is given to Israel is spent here in America supporting American companies, creating American jobs. You know, and that gets lost in translation. A lot of people don't talk about that. So yes, the foreign aid is very important, but we also need to recognize that it's also helping stimulate the American economy. But people don't want to talk about that. So it's countering lies with facts.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, that's, I feel like that's something that we have to do a lot also on this podcast. Also, once we go beyond it, is showing the actual facts of what's happening. That's something that we've also mentioned before, where yes, there's what you believe in, and then there's what's actually happening. So you might believe this thing, you might not want to think that this is possible, but look at what actually is happening. So I want to ask, either you mentioned it before, you mentioned it just when we were talking, you want to basically depoliticize Zionism, which does supporting Israel doesn't have to be political, just like Zionism doesn't have to be political. But what me and Ozzy, after you told him this, we started talking, we realized, at least for us, I don't know how many other people are like this, we didn't realize that Zionism was even political. For us, it was just another thing that we believe in that we talk about. How do you want to depoliticize Zionism? Because once you really think about it, it's the same thing in some ways.
No, so Brian, before you answer, when you were telling me this a little bit back, I was like confused at first, like I was going with it. I was really interested in what you were saying, and you made some really good points. But like in the back of my head, I was like, how could you depoliticize it? Zionism is like everything about it just sounds super political. So I was like, how, But then like whatever, I started like looking into things and you know just recording more episodes after that and just looking more into Zionism as a whole and the history of Israel and everything about Zionism. And then I was talking to my friends and a few of them who, shame on them, they don't listen to the podcast. So I asked them, I'm like, why don't you listen? And so I was whatever, one specific case just happened like yesterday or 2 days ago. And he says to me, he's like, I don't like to listen to politics. It's just not what I'm into, this and that. And I'm like, and without even thinking about what you told me, I was like, it's not politics. We don't talk politics. We talk Zionism. And then it hit me. I'm like, oh my God, Zionism is not politics. It depends how you look at it. So what do you have to say about depoliticizing Zionism?
I myself, in my personal life, I'm a very political individual, and not that I'm an expert by any means, but I think I have a firm understanding of it, and I think I've come to the realization that it's okay, it's okay that Zionism doesn't have to be so political. Unfortunately, it has become very political. And there's groups on either side that make it very political. But I think at the end of the day, supporting the Jewish people's right and the Jewish people's land and the Jewish people, that doesn't have to be political for Jews, at least. That shouldn't be political. I think that's who we are. That's who we're, ingrained in our DNA. is Israel is being a Jew. That probably didn't come out the right way, but we're tied at the hip, and we should be. I think we have to create this space where it's okay, for a Jew in America that wants to be connected to Israel and says they want to disagree with Israel's politics, but still support the people of the land of Israel. Um, that's a win, man. That's the win for our people here in America. And I think we have to do more to foster that kind of that space here in America.
Okay. I think that's our time limit today. Is there anything else you want to share?
No, guys, thank you for having me on. Continue to use your voices and continue to inspire others to follow in your footsteps. You're doing the right thing. You're on the right path, and whatever I and friends of mine can do to help and support you guys in Israel without any hesitation, we're here for you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
It's
It means a
awesome.
lot.
All right, so guys, that's a wrap. What a pleasure to be with the two of you. To everyone that's watching and listening, you got to go follow these guys. Follow them on Instagram, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, at Within Zionism. Download the podcast, listen to the podcasts. We've got to do everything that we can to support these guys and get them up to thousands of listeners. God willing, that'll happen. So I'm Yisrael Chai. That's a wrap.
Amen.
Thank you, Brian.
All
All
It was
right,
awesome
and
having
then
you.
there's always my catchphrase: "Stay safe and have a great day."